Hi students, this video will explain how to write your literary paragraph, which will be the third body paragraph in your essay. Now, it's important to remember the purpose of this paragraph. First, remember that you're writing about literature this time. Before you were writing about history, now you're writing about your poems. Also, remember that the ultimate purpose of the essay is to convince people to come tour your location. Now, very much like your last body paragraph and the one before that one, you will have the following format: a topic sentence, a piece of evidence, followed by elaboration, a second piece of evidence, followed by further elaboration, and a wrap-up sentence. Now, when writing your topic sentence, you want to keep in mind what your location is. I'm going to be writing about O'Connell Street. You will also want to refer back to your TP cast and use the information that you found there so that you don't have to come up with everything all over again. So on my TP cast about O'Connell Street, I had information about allusion, repetition, imagery, attitude, shift, and the title's meaning. I'm going to write about the allusions and repetition because I find that easiest to understand and I think I can write the most about it. So my topic sentence might read, O'Connell Street's literary significance shines clearly in the poem Easter 1916, written by W.B. Yeats, because its use of allusion and repetition shows the fight for Irish independence as terrible but necessary. So what's important about this sentence? Well, for starters, I name my location. So make sure that when you start out your paragraph, you name the location you're writing about. I also clarify that I'm writing about a literary perspective. So far, I've only written about history. So it's important for my readers that I explain I'm now talking about literary significance. I also make sure to name the title and the author of the poem. I name the two devices that I'm going to discuss, and I explain the purpose of the poem. Now pause and go ahead and write your topic sentence using the one in front of you as a guide. Once you've written your topic sentence, you can move on to your first piece of evidence. Now, I promised in my topic sentence that I would write about allusions. So my first piece of evidence would read, for example, Yeats's poem alludes to important famous leaders. To know they dreamed and are dead, MacDonagh and McBride and Connolly and Pierce. So what's important is the quote. The quote is absolutely necessary. You need to quote the part of the poem that uses the device you're talking about. So in this quote, there is an allusion to famous people. Also, as with all pieces of evidence, I start with a transition, such as, for example, or for instance, or the text reads. And then I make sure to add my author's name. Now, because I have my author's names here, I don't have to do an in-text citation, which is awesome. So for your literary paragraph, you do not have to worry about in-text citations. Now, go ahead and pause and write your evidence sentence before moving on. Once you've written your evidence sentence, you can move on to your elaboration. When writing your elaboration, you're going to need to remember your evidence because you're now going to explain why this quote is important. So I might write, allusions reference famous people, places, or things. Yeats names these men because he wants his audience to remember the leaders who sacrificed their lives on Easter 1916 for Irish freedom. He also states sadly, to know they dreamed and are dead, because he can't believe people could die for having dreams of freedom. Therefore, Yeats is both lamenting the deaths of these men, but also praising their dreams. Now, the first thing that's important is you want to make sure to explain how does the device work. So I explained that illusions reference famous people, places, or things. Then I explain why does the author use the device. Yeats uses the device to make us remember the leader's name. The how and why should remind you of your TP cast, because in your TP cast, you should have recorded the how and the why. Therefore, to find this information, you can just go back to your TP cast, and it should be there. Now next, you can explain how does the author feel? What emotion does the author feel? I know that Yeats is sad, and that's because he's thinking about how these men died for trying to find freedom. And then lastly, summarize the author's purpose. Now go ahead and pause and write an elaboration section of your own. When you're done with the elaboration, you can move on to your next piece of evidence. So my second piece of evidence, based upon what my topic sentence said, is it's going to be about repetition. So I might write, additionally, Yeats's poem repeats the line, "A terrible beauty is born," 3 times, including in the final line of the poem. So what's important here? Well, for starters, I need to start with a transition. I use the word additionally because this is my second piece of evidence. Then I make sure to use my author's name, and I include my quote, which is an example from the poem where repetition is used. Now, go ahead, write your evidence sentence, and then you can move on to the next section. Once you're done with your second piece of evidence, it's time for the elaboration. So, think about your evidence before writing your elaboration. Why is this evidence important? I might write, repetition of a line is meant to emphasize. Yeats wants his audience to remember that the events of Easter 1916 is both terrible and beautiful. How can something be both? How can this paradox be true? The rebellion against the British is terrible because people will be wounded and die in the fight. However, it is also beautiful because it will lead to the freedom Ireland has waited so long for. Now, what's important about this? Well, very similarly to your previous example of elaboration, it starts with how does the device work? Repetition works by emphasizing. Then, why does the author use the device? It's because he wants his audience to remember what he's saying over and over again. Then I add in something that's not required, but it's something that's sometimes fun to add in. They are rhetorical questions that I ask to get my reader thinking. Then, last but not least, I summarize the author's purpose. Now go ahead and write your own elaboration section, and then when you're done, you can move on to your final sentences of your paragraph. Now, your final sentence is going to be the wrap-up. My wrap-up might read, ultimately, Yeats's Easter 1916 offers both warning and encouragement to his readers. Through allusion and repetition, he warns that their fight for freedom will be difficult and dangerous, but encourages them that it will be well worth the sacrifice. By traveling to O'Connell Street, tourists will be in the presence of the location that inspired Yeats's words. Now, what's important here? Well, for starters, I transition to my wrap-up. You could write ultimately, in conclusion, in the end, most importantly. Then I make sure to restate my author and title. And then last but not least, I state the overall purposes essay, which is to make sure that tourists come to my location, because that's the purpose of your essay, to convince people to come see what you're talking about. So go ahead, write your wrap-up, and hopefully you will be done with your paragraph. If you have any questions about writing this paragraph, I will be in my classroom tomorrow at 8 a.m. and also tomorrow after school for my office hours. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.